Maybe as individuals you might have heard this from your parents also, or maybe the society in which you live in, that painting or drawing portraits of living beings is something which Islam forbids, or the Quran forbids, or the hadith prohibits. So therefore you should not draw pictures of living beings, you should not take pictures, you should not hang these pictures, and if you are praying in a room in which there are pictures, you must cover that picture maybe, or just take it off. And therefore, if you do that, if you don't do that, again the same thing is told to you, that angels would not come to your house, because angels don't trespass, they don't enter a house in which pictures are hanging, especially of living beings. Again, this is a hadith which is being quoted. Now, let me also explain the background of this narrative. As you must have now till now gathered, to understand a hadith, it's essential that you gather all the variant texts of that hadith, because if you just pick out one text and then start to interpret it, you might end up on the wrong side, because each narrative leaves out certain details which other narratives cover. So you must have a complete picture. Now what has happened is that in certain narratives it has been said that pictures should not be made, and if you make these pictures, then on the day of judgment you will be asked to inject life in these pictures, because you painted a person who was a living being. So if you do so here, then in the hereafter you'll be asked to actually inject life into that picture, and of course it would of course be a cause of humiliation. Now and again, there are certain other narratives in which these details are not given as to why we have been stopped from making these pictures, for example. Now, as I said, there are certain other set of narratives which make the matter absolutely clear, and that is that in the times of Arabs, in the Arabian times, there were certain pictures and statues and sculptures which took the shape of idols. They were being worshipped. So people would bow down before them, they would regard them to be gods, to be demigods, to be deities, and they would worship them, and they would think them to be alive, and hence they would just present their salutations to them. They would pray before them. They would ask for their prayers to be fulfilled before them. Now, another class of narratives, another class of hadiths tells us that the Prophet was actually pointing towards such pictures which people worship or used to worship in those times that are being forbidden. So the words in Arabic are hazihi sur or tilka sur, which means such kind of pictures, these kind of pictures. So not all pictures, not all portraits, but pictures and portraits which you used to worship, they should not be allowed, and you must not make such pictures, you must not make such idols. This is what the Prophet was telling us. Unfortunately, because of this the context eluded many of our scholars, and they thought that the prohibition of pictures is for all times, for every type of picture, without realizing that the prohibition was only for those pictures which were treated as gods or semi-gods or lesser gods who would actually be intercessors to the great God. So it is here that we need to understand that the prohibition is of paintings or pictures which might be presented to you has no basis at all. You can take pictures, you can draw pictures of living beings, you can paste them on the walls, you can do anything with them, of course, as long as they are not vulgar, because that's another thing that we must always be very careful of. But drawing any sort of pictures or making a sculpture of any form is absolutely fine, because the prohibition in the times of the Prophet did not relate to all types of pictures or statues or idols. It actually related to those which were worshipped. So we had the pictures of Abraham and Ishmael being hung from the Kaaba. Of course, they were imaginary pictures, but no one knew what Abraham looked like or Ishmael looked like, but they would make these imaginary pictures and hang them from the Kaaba. And they would have these winged angels, and these have winged horses, that the way we have in mythology, and then they would just prostrate before them. So remember, again, this is a question of misinterpretation, just as this was the same question which had arisen in our previous segment regarding dogs. Without realizing the context was about certain types of dogs, and without realizing that the saliva of the dog is absolutely the same as any other animal, because of the fact that we were not able to gather all those narratives, we made a wrong interpretation. So very similarly here also, the same issue has arisen. We have not been able to gauge the fact that certain types of pictures were forbidden, not all types of pictures. So today, if you want to become a painter, if you would like to paint and draw, or you want to become a sculptor, or of any sort, and if your mama or your papa or your family members stop you because of religious reasons, you can tell them, well, it has an entirely different background. It does not relate to my paintings or my sculptures that I make, but it has a very specific background.